Hello, this is Argent with a reaction review of Hardcore Henry. Now, I occasionally have people say, RG, you don't really always talk about politics during these. I mean, sometimes you talk about politics or religion, but other times you talk about other stuff or you just talk about the movie, etc. Now, I think what you have to understand is the title was back. I've had the idea to call it reactionary reviews for years. I've taken all the stuff down off of my old blog, but I think I did reviews called reactionary reviews like 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So it was meant to be reactionary in both senses. Reactionary, like as in I'm reacting to it, like kind of like reaction videos, but not exactly. Because reaction videos, the thing about them is why they're cancerous is because they don't really add any value. They just watch something and they just film themselves with their mouths open like a fucking guppy. I mean this like in terms of like reacting like just in the normal sense of the term before it was colored by that. In addition to kind of the political aspect of it. Even when I wasn't really that edgy, when I was just like a conservative, I just like it has a nice alliteration, reactionary reviews. Um, Also, if I just did I guess you could say a secular movie review series, I just don't want to make a second like series because I already have enough things where I just have like a complete series or whatever. So everything's just kind of done under the label reaction reviews. It just is easier to make a playlist, etc. So I say this because I probably won't talk too much about politics for this film. So this movie is Hardcore Henry. Um, One of the only movies to ever get the R rating in Canada. Now, for those of you who don't live in Canada, which is probably like 90% of my audience, we have the rating system's a little different. We have G, which I think is the same in America. We have PG, which is pretty much the same in America. However, we don't have PG 13. So the lower half of PG 13 is absorbed into PG, and the upper half of PG 13 is absorbed into 14A. So 14A in Canada is the lower half of the R rating and the upper half of the PG 13. So it's very, very uncommon for anything to ever be rated above 14A. Above 14A, we have 18A, and then we have R. I believe how it works is 14A movies can't be seen unless you're over 14 or accompanied by an adult. 18A, I think, is you cannot see unless you're over 18 or accompanied by an adult. R-rated movies in Canada are you cannot see them unless you're over 18. Period. End of story. So because most like R-rated movies actually aren't that So because most R-rated movies aren't actually that hardcore, like they might have a little nudity or a bit more violence than kind of your typical PG-13 fare, but it's not like they're porn movies or whatever. Pretty much everything gets 14A in Canada. So I'm just rambling about this because I find it kind of interesting. But this movie got an R rating in Canada, and I can't remember the last time a film ever did. Even movies like Hostel 2 have gotten them. The only other movie I can think of that got an R rating is Antichrist, which I should do a review on at some time because that was an interesting film. Anyway, so Hardcore Henry is a film that's shot completely in first-person mode. It's funny that I do the slip of the tongue and I say first-person mode, because Hardcore Henry is the attempt to basically make a movie like a video game. The whole film's in first person. Literally, just it's hard to really describe. It's a very kind of aesthetic movie, aesthetic film. You kind of have to watch it. Just because the whole thing's shot from Henry's perspective, how he like holds guns looks like a first person shooter. There's like quick time events. There's things that look like quick time events. Abstract and I saw this movie together, and when we were watching it in theaters, this would be a good movie to do like a commentary track over. Because I kept like there's a scene where he's chasing a guy, and I'm like, failure to keep the target in sight will cause desynchronization. There's another scene where he shoots some people. I'm like, Ezio did not kill civilians. And there's scenes where just like press the X button, out of ammo, gun jam, etc. So the basic premise of this film is as follows. So Henry wakes up with his absurdly hot wife, and she is absurdly hot, who tells him that there was some sort of accident and he lost most of his body and he's been turned into a super cyborg. It's kind of like a loading screen almost, like a cutscene at the beginning of a game, because she's like, you know how in games like they're where you're a cyborg or whatever, you like watch them put the parts on you and then they're like, could you move the control stick up and down? I'm going to charge it. And then they just did stuff like that. It's like, Henry, let me charge your shield generator. And then you go in and it's like, pick your voice. They never wind up getting the voice, so he's a silent protagonist. So while they're doing the voice thing, Akon breaks in. Yes, Akon, the band, is in this movie. And Akon announces that he's against he's against Henry for some reason. So Henry succeeds in escaping along with his wife, and they crash land on a highway. But Akon and his band of mercenaries show up. Akon, for whatever reason, has psychic powers and can pick people up and throw them. Whenever Henry tries to charge him, he uses his telekinetic powers to throw him away. It's kind of like an artificial barrier, like, you know, in those boss fights, like where you have to do something special and you run at them and they just force push you away. It's like that. So while that's happening, he meets up with his wife gets kidnapped, like in all video games, and he meets up with Jimmy, who's played by Charlton Copley. Now, for those of you who don't know who Charlton Copley is, he has a long history of making otherwise shitty to mediocre movies way better. District 9 was kind of his breakout role, but he was also in A-Team, which is another movie I actually really like. He was the only good thing in Elysium. He was in... he's in a couple other movies. He doesn't get nearly enough work, but he was Jimmy in this movie. So Jimmy's like, look, Henry, we didn't get a chance to charge your fusion core. So I'm going to give you this cell phone that has an objective marker on it, and you just follow the cell phone to the objective marker, and I'll periodically call to check in on you. So it's just like a video game. You have to go here and kill this guy and get his thing, and if you don't do this within the set time limit, your cyborg body's going to start shutting down. So Henry, we go through like a long thing. This movie takes place in Moscow. So I'm not going to really bore you with going through it because the plot is pretty kind of repetitive. It's just kind of like Henry just keeps going through Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. There's not much of a story. Most of the film is just action scenes. The twist we find out is that Jimmy was developing a cyborg army for Akon, and the problem with the cyborg soldiers is they had to lobotomize them, and they had a problem with emotional motivation. They just weren't as good soldiers as people who had a personal or ideological reason for fighting. So that was kind of the problem, and because of Jimmy's failure, Akon used his psychic powers to break his back. So we see Jimmy die numerous times throughout the movie, and it turns out that Jimmy is paralyzed in a wheelchair, but that he's able to control a number of avatars. So he can control all these different avatars, and there's like a whole bunch of them. And they're almost kind of like specialized classes. Like there's one that's a sniper class, there's one that's like an engineer class, there's one that's a close combat class, and then there's my favorite one, which is like a British officer who has like a machine gun. So they're in Chernobyl is where his lab is, and I swear to God, there's honestly a scene because he wears like a ghillie suit and uses a sniper rifle where he says "Stokol" in like a fake Russian accent for some reason. So he's like, you see, we have to go and we have to take down Akon. I want to get revenge, and you've been given like superpowers, so let's go fight him. So they like go to Akon's building to get his wife back and to defeat him, and they get there, and there's like a bunch of just really long, tedious action scenes, and then it turns out that Jimmy's been shot because they brought his actual body there because of reasons. Why they couldn't just send one of his avatars there, I don't know. But he dies in Henry's arms, telling him that he was the only friend he ever had. Um, so there goes that good character. The only kind of interesting part of the film. So then Henry has a really long, drawn out fight scene with like another, I don't know, another 200 warrior guys. The only good part of the scene is part of the way through, a med kit explodes and there's adrenaline in it. And it fills up his bullet time meter. And he fires, he just goes and he kills a bunch of the guys. And then he reaches Akon. And it turns out that his wife was actually not his wife and she's Akon's wife. And that she was working for him the whole time. Because the whole thing was about developing a interface, developing like a videotape indoctrination thing that they would use to show other cyborgs to make them develop some sort of emotional attachment to a cause. So they're going to take the tape because they have like a camera in Henry's brain. They're going to take the tape and they're going to put it onto the memories of all the other cyborg soldiers, and they're going to like play the same video game plot and think that their wife is the same wife. And because of all of that, they're going to be loyal, emotionally intact, non-lobotomized servants for Akon's army. And if that's not the fucking greatest plan I've ever heard, I don't know. So they have a fight, and he succeeds in killing Akon, and then his wife is like, his not wife is like, just follow your heart, Henry. So he throws her out of a helicopter and she dies. And then the movie just stops. There's no ending, it just stops. And then that's the film. Henry never talks. We nothing's really explained. Like who Akon was, why he had psychic powers, who his wife was, who Jimmy was. We don't fucking know anything about this movie. And that was Hardcore Henry. I have to say it didn't lie to me. It was hardcore. It was Henry. There were guns in it, and it was in first person. Would I recommend this movie? Not really. I don't know. If you like action movies, if you just want to watch like the most like turn your mind off, just not even like it's not even a dumb fun action movie. It's weird because it's really like well shot, and the action scenes are really intense and interesting, and it kind of feels like you're playing like a really good like kind of tactical shooter like Stalker or something like that. And that's pretty cool. It also kind of feels like Far Cry. So it's kind of fun to do that. I would say if you wanted to watch this movie, and I'm going to warn you, it is super graphic, both in terms of nudity and violence. Get a bunch of your friends together. Watch it when it comes out on DVD or obtain it through other methods. Not that I'm endorsing that. But yeah, get a copy of it. Watch it with some friends. If you drink, get a little... I don't drink myself, but get a little buzzed. And just do voiceover commentary. And you'll have a lot of fun doing that. Just like quote lines from video games. Just say, oh, this is like that scene. And that'd be a lot of fun. But I wouldn't go see this movie in theaters. It's kind of disappointing because it's not a bad idea for a movie. It's not a bad kind of concept film. They just didn't really tell a story. If they had told a story, this probably would have been a pretty good movie. But as it was just kind of very, very mediocre, albeit with good action scenes. I hope that review was somewhat enjoyable. This is Argent. I'll talk to you guys.